So let's just fill in the missing piece that this whole thing. It says when we talk about adapting to stress, there are 4 sources of stress in a person's life. We just talked most of the day yesterday about 1 source of stress, okay? But there's also stress from the environment. One of the interesting things is that you can actually state that the only thing that can damage a human being is stress. But we normally use the word stress in a very limited fashion. And in fact, as far as I can tell, what people think stress is when you're under pressure. Is that right? That's basically what they mean when they say stress, isn't it? You have to figure out how not to be under pressure. But there is environmental stress, isn't there? So one of the ways that you can damage a human being is to drop a tree on them. I call that environmental stress. Okay? So if we understand that stress just means something that the organism cannot handle without adapting. It doesn't just mean when you're under pressure, okay? That's what stress is. Conditions that require the body to adapt, change somehow in order to meet the conditions. That's called stress. So whenever things change rapidly, for instance, having a tree fall on you, your conditions have changed very quickly, haven't they? The body can't meet that demand. It's too fast for it. So it puts stress on the organism, and it has to adapt somehow to what happened. That's what we kind of mean by stress. There's a lot of different ways that you can get stress from the environment. The one that has been a big subject of controversy for many years is not what I necessarily mean, like polluting it. I don't consider that to be particularly stressful, even though I know that's very out. I'm not supposed to believe that. One of the things I do know about bodies is that they're very good at adapting to poisonous conditions, as long as it happens slowly. And there's a whole group of people not too far from here, I suspect, that have been demonstrating that for years by playing with poisonous snakes. Isn't that right? It's one of their favorite things to do, is to get a really poisonous snake and let it bite them. And they take years to develop that ability to get used to the poison. Their body adapts, and after a while, it's not poison anymore to them. So if they can do that, why can't we all? I think those are just ordinary people, aren't they? It's the same thing with pollution. Our bodies adapt to it. It causes us a little bit of stress, but we pretty much can handle it. I don't like it necessarily. I'm not advocating it, but I don't think it's as big a problem as everybody wants to make it out to be. Assuming, of course, that you're being responsible for your life and in a pretty good state. Because that's got to do a lot with this. Everybody has what is for them an optimum. These are the conditions that if I'm in them, everything is optimum for me, everything functions really, really well. And around that optimum, there's a range of variation that I can experience without even really noticing it's going on. So I'm never in optimum conditions for very long, am I? Because everything is constantly changing. These are my real conditions, aren't they? The weather changes, the temperature changes, all sorts of changes go on, and the body adapts to that. As long as the adaptations, the changes are within that range of parameters that I'm drawing this little line on, I don't even notice it's going on. It's really invisible to me. When it goes outside of that, I find the adaptation unpleasant. I experience a little bit of pain while the body changes itself to meet some condition that's happened in my world. Most people are living in such a low state that this little band of conditions that they can be in without experiencing discomfort is very small. If your body is functioning really well because you're filling it with energy, that expands. And you can go through huge variations and not even notice it. It's the same thing with pollution. If the body is functioning really well, you can sit in air that you can cut and not even notice it. I know, because I lived in LA during the time when it was at its worst. And it really did look sometimes like fog. It was so bad. Visibility was less than a city block at times. Didn't even get watery eyes after a while. It's like, okay, no big deal. So I know that's true. I've been through it. If you're willing to sort of get the body operating at peak efficiency. Most people I really have noticed, that band is very small. They can't go through much variation without it being unpleasant for them. They get little, like I say, just minor little aches and pains and headaches and all sorts of weird little things as their body adapts to changing conditions. So almost everything is stressful to them. You can get stress from nutrition. If you don't give it the food that it needs to do its little thing, it gets very stressed out. You can get stress from activity. And most of these come from sudden changes. It's really obvious, isn't it? If you've been sitting in a chair at an office for 10 years and you decide to go run around the block, you're probably going to be a little stressed by that. But if you'd maybe walk around the block for a few weeks and then speed it up a little bit and do it over a period of time, it probably wouldn't bother you, huh? It's sudden changes that are stressful to us. So people often, when they decide there's something wrong with their nutrition, huh? And they decide they're going to fix it, and they do it overnight. And then they don't feel too good and wonder what the problem is. You don't do it that way. If you do want to make a change to any of these things, you do them kind of gradually and let your body get used to it, and then it's not stressful. And the last one is from emotional stress, and that's what we talked about yesterday. That's the one that we pretend like doesn't exist. And the interesting thing is there are specialists in all of these, aren't there? There's people who specialize in activity. There are people who specialize in nutrition. And there are people who specialize in environmental stuff. And they pretend like theirs is the only one. And it don't work that way. You have to look at all of them, because these things exist in a balance. You got these four things, and they're always in balance to each other, okay? If you change your activity, you need to change your nutrition as well, don't you? That's just the way it is. These things are always in balance to each other. If you're gonna not do so much activity, you better eat less, or it's going to show very shortly, isn't it? The same way it works the other way around. If you're going to increase your activity, you need to change your nutrition accordingly. They always have to be in balance to each other. So specializing doesn't work. You go to somebody and say, design me the perfect nutrition. And they do the best they can, but they believe that that's all there is to it. You have to be able to balance it against all four of them, okay? It's just the way it is. So if you really want to understand this stuff and decide to be responsible for your own state of well-being, which is what this gives you the possibility of, it says you are no longer subject to conditions. You can actually be responsible for your own state of well-being if you choose to do this. And you have to look at all four sources of stress. When you get an adaptation, I know people want to assume that it's emotional. And that's not necessarily so. So, because of the way you live, you probably can look back and see some emotional thing that you did a few days ago. That may or may not be it. You always got to check all four of them. And say, well, if it's nutritional, then fixing my emotions isn't going to do nothing. I got to do the nutritional part too, huh? The one thing that I do find interesting, though, is that these don't play a very big role in it. It is generally emotional. Why do people have bad nutrition? It's not that hard to eat well, is it? But we have bad nutrition because of this, huh? We're always upset, we're always in a hurry, we're always worried, can't take time to eat. And then there are those little binges where you just eat weird things because you're in an emotional state. And most people really do not eat for nutrition, do they? They eat for pleasure, so they can overcome some problem with their emotional state. Isn't that about right? How many of you do that? You get all upset emotionally and then you want to go eat something to make you feel good. That's pretty common. So a lot of times the imbalance that happens in these three things is actually coming from an attempt to balance out a really yucky emotional state. And so you try and change these things to affect that. Now we do need to be aware of emotional stress. And what might be really neat is if you could see that you're in charge of your emotional state. It does not just happen to you. Nobody makes me mad. You cannot make me mad. Now, that's tough to believe coming from this one, because as I point out constantly, Phil still has trouble with his little temper. Or, as they said a few years back, he's got a short fuse. But it's still true. You can't make me mad. I have to do that myself. How do I do that? By expecting something of you that's ridiculous. I expect you to behave a certain way, and you don't, and I blame you for it. Is that really the problem? That you won't be someone else for me? That's what I keep trying to get through my head. You really should change for me, you know. What's your problem? Why won't you be someone else, just for me? That's what anger is about, isn't it? Damn you, you won't be somebody else for me. Now, that's my problem, isn't it? It's up to me to look and see what I expect of you and realize it's wrong. You are not going to be that way. And deal with it accordingly. Then I don't have to get angry anymore. It comes from my own expectations. You can't do it to me. All you can do is be you. right? What I do find very amusing is that I sure want you to let me be me, but apparently I don't want to let you be you. Isn't that nasty?
Double standard.
No kidding. And that's true of all the emotions. Guilt is I won't let me be me. Isn't that right? Well, what did you expect? That's the way I am. It's up to me to try and understand where that desire is coming from. It usually comes from conditioning. And see the illusion in it and remove the desire instead of sitting around being guilty. It takes some work, doesn't it? Go ahead and be free enough to experience the thing until I find out where the desire is coming from and see the illusion in it. Then I stop doing it when I see it's just a lie. Guilt is an attempt to control me so I won't be that way anymore, instead of seeing the illusion in things. And that's what's apparently so hard for people to grasp about all this. It's not about finding a set of rules to live by. We don't have a set of rules for you to live by. If you really want a set of rules, there's a ton of them out there. Take your pick. Every religion, every philosophy, every government has tried to set them up. Isn't that about right? Every little group. I don't think you need to come here to get a set of rules. What this is about is the understanding that everything comes from the way that I see things. If I don't like the way I'm living, I need to change the way I see things. I'm responding to what I perceive. And I often perceive things inadequately. That little thing that I have with anger is about, you knew better and you did it just to annoy me. I doubt it. I really doubt it. I don't think you knew better. You understand? But that's what it's about. That's the way I see it. And I'm wrong. Same thing with guilt. I knew better. Why did I do that? Because that's the way I see it. If I feel guilty about getting angry, I'm playing that game, you understand? Well, that's the way I see it, and I haven't changed that yet, so I am going to have to deal with the consequences of seeing things wrong. So the game is not to learn a set of rules, which don't work. They only work when everything's going really well, huh? But when you get under a little pressure and you got to do something now, rules don't work, do they? It's to look at the way you see things and see if you can change the way you see things. If you want to move towards some kind of more spiritual life, then you make an effort to always see things in a way that gives you peace, where you're at peace with things. And that's the gist of this whole game, is to move towards peace of mind. All that emotional stuff comes from not being at peace with the way things is, huh? So I choose to fight it and argue with it and change it and see if I can get it to go my way. The whole spiritual thing is about learning to see it for what it is and be at peace with it, just the way it is. All this emotional stuff is a challenge to you. Can you be at peace with this? Many years ago, I read a book that I really really, really enjoyed reading and recommend highly. It was called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. I thought that was a pretty catchy title. And since it sort of covered me, I thought maybe I could read it. Lord knows I am lazy. And what I took away from that book, it was not a very big book. It's pretty small. But what I took away from it, that I kept with me for many, many years, was one simple idea out of it, okay? And it came down to this. That every experience that you have, you look at it and say, well, what did I think needed to be loved? And if you look at everything that way, and every event that comes to you, you say, well, what did I think I needed to love? Isn't this it? Well, you'll be enlightened shortly. About the best recipe I ever found. Simplest idea I've ever heard, huh?
It's like hanging out with Jesus or something.
Just that simple. That thing that's upsetting you, well, what did you think you needed to love? I think that's it, huh? That's all you're doing when you go into an emotional state, is standing and declaring to the universe, I will not love this. Hey, that's something to be proud of, isn't it? I will not love this. To me, that's just another way of saying the same thing. Can you be at peace with this? Can you look at it and understand it and find a way to be at peace with it? So as you go through your life, I suspect that life is going to bring you many things to love. And most of them you are going to refuse. And the consequence is that you will go through that little thing that we drew and destroy yourself. Because you will not love. Isn't that a hoot? It takes a lot of responsibility. This is not you annoying me. This is me being unwilling to love you just the way you are. I can love you if you're a murderer. I don't know if I'm going to let you murder me. Just because I love you doesn't mean I'm going to let you do what you want to do to me, you understand? Love does not mean lay down and let people walk all over you. If you think that's what love is, you're not getting it. I don't have to hate you to stop you from murdering me. I just ain't going to let you. That's true of just about everything. It doesn't have to be that extreme. The fact that I love you doesn't mean that you have license to do anything you want. You do, actually. You're just going to find that I'm not there to do it too. It's just that simple. Yeah, I've always said that about the war game. I have this real problem with it. I don't like it at all, and I sure don't want to play it. But I don't mind if you do. If you want to play that game, okay. I just promise you, if you do it in my backyard, I'm moving. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm not going to stand there and stick up for my rights to have you do it somewhere else. I'm just not going to be there. That's part of being at peace with it. I don't need to tell you to stop. Yeah, poor little victimized me. I have to move because you want to play the war game. Well, I don't look at it that way. I just don't look at it that way. I don't have any rights. I don't have a right to make you move. One of the funniest things I ever heard many years ago, remember the great famine in Ethiopia? Everybody was so upset about. And some people were at a workshop like this and they brought that up because the idea of victim came up. You know, obviously, these people are victims, aren't they? That's obvious. So what about the poor people in Ethiopia? And the speaker at the time said, hell, the only problem they've got is the water went away and they wouldn't move. They stuck up for their rights to stay where there's no water. That's it. End of story. This is my place. I have a right to stay here. And you have to take care of me because nobody can live here anymore. So now we got a problem because a bunch of people are sticking up for their rights. Now that's called inadequate response, isn't it? Conditions changed. And you didn't respond appropriately. You decided to use a stupid not-I method to deal with it. By God, I have a right to be here. Yes, you do. You have a right to sit there and die. If that's what you want to do. I'm not going to defend my right to have you leave, okay? I'm going to leave. It's my responsibility. If I don't like the game that you're playing, it's my responsibility to deal with it, and I'll just take a hike. I don't mind. That's one of the things that one can get out of this idea of seeing I'm responsible for my own physical and mental and emotional well-being. As I start to see that all of this comes from a simple thing. I'm not very good at loving anything. And life keeps bringing me things to love. I have no clue why life does that, but boy, does it do that, huh? It's got this hang-up about it, in fact. Whether you like it or not, that's what life does, huh? Got a real hang-up on the subject. Life keeps bringing me things. Can you love this, Phil? And usually the first answer is no. But I'll keep working at it. Most of us, playing the role of victim, take that as an opportunity to be irresponsible, huh? And say this is all your fault. We don't even see that intelligence, that living intelligence that brought this to me and asked me a question. Can you love this? Are you willing to grow a little bit and see if you can love this thing I've brought to you? That's one of the things we can learn from this. If you work with it and say, can I stop believing in all these ideals that I have? What are the ideals for, folks? What are they for? Aren't they all about? Yeah.
For the purpose of no disturbance.
That's right. Isn't that what they're all about? If things were this way, then I would not have to change and I'd be okay anyway. Isn't that what they're all for? If things were these ideal set of conditions, and I could remain the incomplete, undeveloped being that I am now, and it would be okay. That's what they're for, aren't they? So you start looking at them and you're realizing that what you're doing is begging day in and day out to remain undeveloped. Not to grow, not to have to. Any questions or comments?
I find in my life that's why it's whenever I forget the new decision, that's when I forget to make an attempt to love those things.
Yeah.
It's when I forget the new decision.
Yep, because that's what I want to do. I want to sit here just as I am and be non-disturbed. And I've got some other purpose to the life. I can look at things that come and say, okay, this is a job for me to do. Somebody brought me something to do. That sounds like fun. And I've noticed that life is very intelligent about this, huh? Brings me something that's just a little bit too hard. But I can. Never brings me something I cannot do. Isn't that interesting? Somehow life can gauge what I can do and what I can't. It doesn't bring me the things that I just cannot do. It brings me something that I can, but just can't now. But with a little effort, I can do that, and then I'll get a nice little break, and everything will be really smooth sailing for a short time while I recuperate from my efforts to deal with that one, and then life will bring me something else. At least that's the way I've sort of watched it over the years. I usually get a little break in between once I finally get to say, okay, I can give up my ideal on that one. I don't have to have non-disturbance. I can love that one too. And then everything will go really well for a short time, and then the next one comes. But there is an intelligence there, isn't there?
The other comment, if I could make it, is I find that as soon as in the inner place I'm free to experience the challenge, that the challenge almost instantly goes away.
Really?
I'll just give you a real life example.
Okay.
The other day I'm in a bar getting all pissed off that I can't get served because I forget my purpose. My purpose is for this guy to serve me immediately and not disturb me.
Right.
And then as soon as I remember, wait a minute, I did decide I wanted to do something else.
I
He comes
understand.
up and serves me.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that?
Oh, yeah. And I haven't always noticed that the challenge just goes away. Many of them have stayed for the rest of the life. They're not a challenge anymore because I've grown to the point where I can deal with them. But I still go places and they don't serve me for 20 minutes. It just isn't such a big pain in the neck anymore. It's okay, I expect it every now and again. I am very likely to just leave and go someplace where they will serve me, you know. I don't need to get upset about it, you know. I mean, that actually happened Saturday night. I went to the grocery store and they were all interested in having a conversation instead of taking my money. Okay, there was another person checking out over there. I just left that line and went to the person who was willing to work. No big deal. I guess I could have screamed at those people that I deserve service now. I will often do that. If you just really don't want to serve me, then what the hell am I doing here? I'll take my money somewhere where they want it. It's okay. Any questions or comments? I hope I got the idea across, okay? I am responsible for my own well-being. If I behave irresponsibly and forget, go to sleep, get all upset, and I need the assistance of a medical practitioner, I don't mind going and getting it. I don't have anything against using a doctor, but I do know that it was my irresponsibility that got me in that position in the first place, okay? So I'm not trying to tell you. Go ahead. If, you know, don't ever see a doctor, don't get medical treatment, that's ridiculous. If they can take care of something, let them do it. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I am saying is, you could be responsible and never get in that position in the first place. You understand? If you have gotten in that position, and that's what you need, then by all means use it. I don't want you to die just because of some stupid idea that you shouldn't need a doctor. That's not what I'm saying. But I know people misunderstand everything I say. So I want to make that real clear. What I'm suggesting is that you be responsible and not get in that position in the first place. Look at your ideals. See what they're for. They're not because you are a high-minded, noble person who knows how it ought to be. They're because you're a lazy son of a bitch who doesn't want to be responsible. That's the game that we like to play, isn't it? I am so superior, I know how it ought to be, I can judge all these things, yada yada. But what you actually are sitting there stubbornly saying, I am not growing up. I am not going to love anything. I'm going to believe that it ought to be different so I can stay just the way I am for the rest of my life. I don't want to do that. I want to leave here knowing that I'm a stronger being than when I arrived. I want to leave here knowing that I'm more capable than when I showed up. That's part of what I'm doing here, is looking to grow and develop. So bring it on. I see the game that life is playing. Bring me things to love. I'm okay with it. I actually like it. So if things get a little too boring, you know, it's getting too easy, I can always turn to life and say, hey, come on, bring me something to love.
Scary.
You think?
I wouldn't want to love being in jail for 10 years.
Okay. If that's what's next for me, then that's what's next for me. If that's where I need to grow and develop, I personally would prefer that it not be. I hope that's not what I need. Wouldn't be my preference either. But if that's what life brings, I suspect he knows what I need. I don't. I don't know what I need. I don't know how to look at me and see where I need to grow and develop, where there's something out of balance. I just don't know how to do that. So I kind of leave it up to an intelligence greater than mine. Any other questions and comments? The other really, really, really wonderful thing about this is that you can always see where your ideals are because you have immediate feedback called an emotion. So you know exactly where they are, what there is for you to understand now. That's all there is to it. Just watch for when you get emotional. Now you know where you have an ideal, an illusion that's preventing you from being at peace. That's neat. Okay, so we take a little break.
I'd like to stop.
Who was that fellow that was sitting outside? Anybody notice?
It was led.
I thought so too. Was that you? Sitting out in front earlier? Yeah? So if I would like to be responsible and take care of this life, it would behoove me to understand emotional states. We draw a little chart to show something that you might want to understand. That depending on what emotional state that you're in, what that is a measure of the amount of energy you have available to you right now to respond to life. That's what an emotional state is, and a measurement of how much energy you have right this moment. So we draw a little chart that starts at coma, which is not much. Not a lot of response to life there, huh? Just physiological stuff going on. It goes up to apathy. One of the things that I've always found amusing is that most people before they die seem to have to go through apathy to get there. Have you ever noticed that? You ever noticed how many old people are hanging out in apathy? I guess that's a way station on the way to death, huh? You gotta get really low in state, decide that nothing works anyway, what's the use, why even bother trying, and hang out there for a while before you die. Unless death comes suddenly by accident, huh, as they say. That seems to be the way it goes for most people, doesn't it? So you get all the symptoms of a body in apathy, which is there's no energy to run it, so it starts breaking up and falling apart. Organ of the skin does the most interesting thing. It turns a sort of grayish color and hangs on your body. And it's the same thing that happens to you when you get in apathy. No matter what your age is, your skin muscle tone gets shot. Everything starts hanging off of you. And it's all based on having bought this idea that nothing will work. So why bother trying? And you sit in self-pity feeling sorry for yourself because you want things to change and you can't do it. Not very much energy. I guarantee you that if you hang out there very long, you will have the most miserable health imaginable. A friend of mine used to say that if you stay around with people in apathy for too long, you will get to hear a lot of organ recitals. You walk up and you ask them how they are, and that's what you get. Well, my liver's failing and my kidneys are shot and my heart's not doing too good. He used to call those organ recitals.
I never got that.
Just a little bit above that, you get into a higher state called fear. I still want to change everything, but I'm afraid to because I know that you're dangerous and wild and will get me if I try. Still not much energy. Then we move up above that and get to a really great place that technically is called held resentment, but we normally call it hatred. Still not a lot of energy. Held resentment, you're really angry, but you're afraid to express it because you know if you do, you'll get whopped. Everybody else is more powerful than you, so you can't express just how ticked you are. So you just sit and hate instead. Hold it all inside. Above that is anger. Probably all know about that. Now I'm in a pretty good state. I actually feel capable of dealing with things. I can whop you all I want. And then above that is boredom. Probably the highest state that most people get in. Which is actually based on an interesting concept. Boredom is a place where you begin to question what you are doing, whether it is actually worth doing or not. And you look at what your life is about, and you start to question whether that's really what life is about. And you end up in this place called boredom. Above that is contentment. In contentment, I'm doing pretty good. But we can't get there because we have this firm, fixed belief that if I'm content, then I just have to take all the shit that life dishes out. Isn't that right? So I've got to hang out in those other states. I've got to be angry so I can stop life from giving me the terrible things that it does. What, you want me to just be content with all this mistreatment? Apparently, if you're content, you're not allowed to do anything about anything. I don't see why I can't contentedly stop you from hitting me. Why do I have to get mad to stop you from hitting me? But that is our point of view, isn't it? If you come up and mistreat me, I've got to get upset in order to do something. I can't calmly and joyfully say, knock it off. It's an interesting illusion we have, isn't it? You can't expect me to be content when I'm being so badly treated. Why not? You can deal with it in contentment just as well as you can deal with it anywhere else. But that's the belief we have, isn't it? These are the states of being that are available to people in a sleeping state. That pretty much describes most people's entire existence as a constant fluctuation as their expectations are dashed between these various emotional states, with occasional little visits to contentment because I got my way for a while. And for some reason, most of us eventually make a home in one of these places. So when nothing else is going on, that's where we go. Everybody seems to pick one of these. So some people pick fear. And then if nothing else is going on around, then they sit around and worry. At least it keeps them occupied, right? Some people pick apathy, some people pick resentment, some people pick anger, and so on, okay? A very, very few pick boredom, and even fewer pick contentment. How many people have you ever met who live in contentment? It happens. I've met a few, but there are not very many, are there? That is our life. The lower you go in these states, the less energy there is available to keep the body working. That little optimum thing that I drew gets tighter and tighter so that the least little change is for you stress. Now, you know that, right? When you're irritable and out of sorts, the least little thing upsets you, doesn't it? But when you're feeling pretty good, somehow that just doesn't seem to matter to you anymore. You can deal with it. And the lower you go, the tighter that little band of how much I can tolerate becomes. And then you say that, you know, you're irritable and out of sorts and so on. Or if you're a lady, you claim you have PMS. If you're a man, you don't even have that excuse. It is possible for me to abandon this interesting place that everyone lives in and live in a higher state. And when I do, I fill this body with energy. It has more than enough to deal with all the things it has to deal with. I have more than enough to get everything done that I want to do in a day. I don't even get tired a whole lot. And when I do, I just rest for a little bit and I'm raring to go again. May not even need that precious 8 hours of sleep a day that we all know we have to have. And that's something I could do if I want to. Live in a higher state. Let this body work. The beginning of these higher states is a state that we call vital interest. It's just an attempt to quickly give you a sense of it. You really got to go there to see what it's about. It's a very interesting state. That's probably the biggest thing about it, is there is an interest in everything that happens. Everything is just fascinating. But it also contains in it a real interesting sense of humor about the whole situation. There's a kind of, I don't know, just a joy to everything. You watch it, you find it interesting, amusing, and you want to play with it. The sense of humor it's interesting how it changes as you change state, what people find amusing. The lower you go, the more derogatory it gets. So people in a really low state, about the only thing they find funny is when somebody gets hurt, as long as it's not them. So you get that really low humor where it's all about somebody being embarrassed and destroyed and yada yada, okay? As you get higher in state, you don't find that so funny anymore, watching people get hurt. The sense of humor up here is just sort of situational. What a funny game we're all playing here. Fascinating, interesting, I enjoy playing it, and it's amusing. We call it vital just to remind ourselves that it is full of life's energy. That's what the word vital means. It comes from the Latin word life. It is full of life. Now, I could, if I wanted to, live there. Live full of life, full of interests, full of fascinating projects, people to play around with, and a kind of joy and enthusiasm for living, instead of these depressed states that I live in most of the time. If I'm willing to hang out here, the body's functions just completely change. That level of optimum gets expanded. I'm not so irritable all the time. I tolerate changes in the environment without even needing to go through a lot of weird adaptations. I remember one time when we were in New Mexico that somebody tried very hard to convince me that I was going to get very sick because I live at sea level, and I suddenly went to New Mexico, which is not sea level anymore, and they told me all the symptoms I was going to have. They told me I'd get headaches and I'd get dry mouth, and I don't even remember what they all were. But I kind of looked at them and said I hadn't noticed. Didn't notice that that was going on. They said, oh, it will. They really wanted to convince me I had to do this. I don't. It doesn't matter that I flew there, and in a couple hours there was a radical change in environment. The body can handle it. It's got plenty of energy to adapt without having to go through all those weird symptoms, okay? That's just the way it is. The immune system actually works when you're in vital interests. And that's what my friend was trying to tell people. If you're worried about all these diseases and so on that are around you, then you're probably going to get them because you live in a state of fear. But if you'll go up and live in vital interest, there's nothing to be concerned about. The immune system becomes almost invulnerable. It starts working right. It doesn't attack itself anymore, which is one of the most amusing parts of the immune system, the way it works in people. It starts turning on the body and destroying it. And then we get all these funny little things called immunodeficiency diseases, okay? It gets confused, doesn't know what to kill, so it kills itself. That don't happen anymore. It starts working right. It kind of boggles the mind that people want to live in states of upset and irritability and so on, when they could live in joy and peace and harmony. What's going on? I guess we want non-disturbance so badly that we just got to stay in that place where I can see all the disturbances that are happening, and I can hate them and do something about them. And if I can change the way I see things and look at the ideals that I live by and see that all they are, what we talked about earlier, is me trying not to love, me trying to be weak and get everything to change so that I don't have to. And I could see things differently and say, no, you know, I think I'm going to accept life's challenge. And I'm going to have fun here. I'm going to play with it. I'm going to look at the games that are going on here and pick the ones I want to play and find some companions to play them with and do it and enjoy. And live up here. There are states higher than this. But these are in some ways, the most interesting states, is this area between bliss and vital interest. You can get really close to bliss without actually going there. The problem with bliss is that it does a weird thing to the body. It kind of turns it off. Not in the sense of normal sense, but you just can't seem to use it. You're full of energy, but you can't get out of your chair. All you can do is sit and smile with this idiot grin on your face. It's like you're disconnected from the controls or something, all right? But if you can hang out just under that place where the control panel gets shut down, you get all the joy that have happened to you in those funny little moments where you just get blipped out, you know, and go into bliss, along with the ability to do things. And we've sometimes called that enthusiasm. You're just filled with this fire, this energy and interest in everything that you're doing. So you do it with joy. That's what enthusiasm means, really, is that you do everything with joy. You could live that way if you want to. All you have to do is give up this silly idea that nothing should disturb you again. And maybe even get interested in the disturbances. It's one of the reasons why I make such a big deal out of, can you look at the things that right now you claim are disturbances and see them as something neat, a little gift that was brought to you. Then you can stay in vital interest when that happens. You can stay in joy and say, great, I get to learn a new thing here. This is not a disturbance. This is a wonderful opportunity for me to learn to love more. If that's what you want to do, is learn to be at peace with things and in harmony with things and love, it's not a disturbance anymore, is it? It's what I said I wanted to do. And I can do it with joy. Even though it's rough.
Love your enemies.
Yep. He actually said more than just love your enemy, you know. He said, leap for joy when you get one.
Oh, yes.
Be very grateful that you finally have one. Your friends aren't going to help you out much to grow. They like you just the way you are. Isn't that about right? Your enemies, on the other hand, now they'll help you grow, won't they? Because they don't like you the way you are. They'll tell you the truth. Your friends won't do that, will they? They don't want to hurt your feelings. Your enemy don't care. So he said a little bit more than love them. He said, leap for joy if you find one. I don't know. I mean, I've gone through this so many times. This is what you could do if you want to. You can go on trying to change yourself and change everyone else and change the world so it won't disturb you anymore, and try very hard to escape your chance here to grow and develop if you want. Stay a child. Or you can change your mind and say, no, that's not what I want to do. I do want to learn these things. And take some interest in it and have a good time. I don't want to be a victim anymore. I just don't want to. That's part of this whole thing. I've been victimized and I have to do something about it. And you did this to me. Life did this to me. Somebody did this to me. I'm a victim and I've got to do something about it. I don't want to play that game anymore. Even though it sounds weird, you know, if you want to do those things, that's fine with me. I'm going to leave, and I'm not even going to feel like a victim like you made me leave. You didn't make me leave. I chose to. It may sound silly, but that's the way it is. You did not make me leave. You did this. You're free to do that. I don't want to be around it. I left. I'm not even going to be victimized by that. Well, why should I have to? Why should I have to leave just because my neighbors are assholes? I think we should pass a law against asshole neighbors instead. That's the game, isn't it? Why should I have to? Well, why not? Why shouldn't you? That's what keeps us there, isn't it? Is that little point of view that says, why should I have to? Why shouldn't you change to make it okay for me? I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that question. I don't know why you should have to. If you really want to ask that question and figure it out, then you'll stay where you are. It's not fair. It's not right. Isn't that the game? I shouldn't have to go through this. Okay. I can't argue with you. If that's the way you want to see it, then you get to stay right where you are, struggling for the rest of your life to get non-disturbance, so you don't have to do that anymore. Or you can just go ahead and take up life's challenge joyfully and hang out and get interested in the thing that's going on. And yeah, sometimes you'll get to be the one who moves because somebody else won't be nice. Aw, poor you. Am I wrong about that? Isn't that kind of what keeps us in that place? Why should I have to? That attitude. Why should I always have to be the one who does something about it? Who changes to suit you? Da, 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 da. Why should I have to do that? Am I wrong? Well, looking at it that way is what keeps you here, isn't it? It's part of it, isn't it? Why should I have to? I don't have to. I choose to. I don't like what you're doing, so I choose to leave. There's no have to about it. I could stay. I just don't want to. You can look at it either way. And, you know, I just use leaving as an example. It isn't always about leaving, is it? That's one thing that I have really learned for self. You can't move to get away from assholes. Because they always beat you to a new place. For many years now, everywhere I move, I have a neighbor right next door who has arguments 24 hours a day, which I don't particularly enjoy. That's been going on for years now. Wherever I move, right next door on one of the houses next to me, there's a couple that argues incessantly. So I don't think I'm going to be able to get away from it. I suspect the next place I move, it'll be there too. I better make my peace with it. The only nice thing about it is that each time they've been really old, and the older they get, the quieter they get, because they don't have the energy anymore to do it at the top of their lungs. So if I just stay long enough, I can't tell they're doing it anymore. The big mistake I made was moving the last time. You know, but they're getting there. Pretty soon I'll start seeing the fire truck show up in front of their house like I did at the last place, you know.
My neighbors have been throwing rocks at me.
Yeah.
In the garden.
I pretty much promise if you move, they'll do something about like that at the next place. They always beat you there. I mean, running is not what I mean when I say leave, okay? What I've sort of found out is you can't run from things like this. It'll follow you. I really do mean you're going to have to get to the point where you're at peace with it. Same thing happened when I moved into the last place I did. This was a new one. There's this little yappy dog that barks 24 hours a day. And folks who supposedly own this little yappy dog have decided that its yard is the entire neighborhood. I have never personally seen them ever go and pick that dog up and put it in their yard. It just runs around everywhere and it barks all night long. Okay? But once again, sit there and say, okay, I'm going to have to learn how to deal with a yappy dog. Well, it's now very old. And it don't run around the neighborhood so good anymore. And I guess it's still yapping, but I hardly ever hear it anymore because it's just getting too old to hear. It's the funniest thing. It's just like the couples that argue after a while. You don't notice they're doing it anymore because it gets too old. I figure if I move again, I'll get a young yappy dog. and a younger couple argue, you know, I have to wait too many years, so I'll just stay where I am. So even though I like to use as the example, one way to deal with things that I don't like is I don't have to stay there. I don't necessarily mean that you spend the rest of your life running. That's not what I mean by not staying there, okay? Part of moving to me is moving out of the place where I have to hate it. And so when I first realized that that dog was never gonna shut up, I looked and said, I wonder where the place in me is that can be at peace with this. I better find it soon.
Or buy a shotgun.
Yeah. I actually thought of poisoned meat. Shotgun's a little too obvious, you know. I'd like to not go to jail over it. I did consider poisoned meat for a while, though. It's a very small dog. I figured just a small amount of arsenic would have done it. Yeah, I did have fantasies about that a few times. Here, puppy, would you like some hamburger? It's nice hamburger. But that's, you know, that's where I was at. Somewhere in me, there is a place where I can be okay with this constant yapping. And I don't know where it is yet, but I better find it soon. Because this is one of those ones that I don't think I'm going to run from, okay? I'm not going to move just because of a yappy dog. All I'll do is go somewhere else and it'll be something else. I need to find out how to do this. So, sometimes that's what I mean by leaving, okay? I will leave this self-righteous attitude that says I shouldn't have to deal with this. That's what I'm going to leave. Well, I don't know if I should have to or not, but I do. It's here. So it really doesn't matter why I should have to deal with it, does it? I suppose I could have done all the legal stuff, and I probably could have gotten the law involved. That's a great idea, isn't it? Let's make enemies of the people who live across the street. Let's get the law involved and report that they're not obeying the leash laws and doing all that stuff, right? And get them to really hate me. And then I'll live there with people who hate my guts for 5 years or until I decide to move. That's a great option, isn't it? Stick up for my rights. After all, what they're doing is illegal, isn't it? So I will turn to the body politic, as someone calls it here, and ask them to help me in my horrible disturbance. Oh, please, I'm a victim. Step in and protect me. And then have a bunch of people who hate my guts. That don't make sense to me. So I don't know why I should have to, but this is what happened. And I thought it would be kind of neat once I got over the irritation and actually looked at it. I thought that would be kind of neat, don't you think, to find a place inside that just isn't bugged by this disturbance anymore, that can just let it go on, let that dog yap, 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 yap constantly and be okay with it. I thought that would be kind of a neat outcome. So I don't know why I have to, but I'm really glad it happened. Because it's true now. A dog can just sit there and yap 24 hours a day, and I'm okay with it. It don't bother me at all. I think that's neat. I would much rather hang out here than go down to here, all right, and get interested in this. There's got to be a way to do this. That's interest, isn't it? I am going to find it. It may take me years, I may have to try all sorts of different things, but I am going to find a way to be at peace with this, to even love a little bratty, yappy dog. Okay? And see if I can put a little joy into it. Does that make sense? Isn't that just as good a response as sitting around and complaining about it, or sticking up for my rights, or blaming them, or trying to please them? I can just picture that, going over there and trying to please them so they'll put their dog in their yard and quote authorities at them, which I certainly could have done. Do you know that they're allowed to... Doesn't that make a lot more sense to say, can I grow from this? Can I get interested in what part of me is irritated by this, and see if I can do something about it? What do you think? Or I can stay just the way I am and demand that the world change to suit me. And go through all this stuff about it, huh? I like that little dog. He provided a neat, very simple demonstration of what I'm talking about in living in interest, okay? Any questions or comments?
You kind of become one with the yapping dog, don't you? No?
I don't know.
Give us a demonstration for the way you just stop jumping around.
In a sense, I mean, I don't know. I'm not real sure what that means exactly. What people mean when they say one with. Okay.
You're not at odds with it.
I was not at odds with it anymore. That's for sure. Yeah, it was just part of what was going on. One other thing going on in the environment. I happen to like quiet personally, but there you go. Yeah, I guess one with is, as long as you don't take it too far. You know, I mean, I don't know that I can ever really merge with anything. Okay, but I can be in harmony with it, I think, is the words that I would use. I'm in harmony with that noise, okay? That's, you know, it makes that irritating sound, and instead of letting myself get irritated by it, I sort of vibrate in harmony with it. And it works. You know, make a nice song instead of screaming and yelling. Any other questions or comments? What time is it?
Can you just decide to go hang out in bliss?
Not me. I've never been able to do that. As best I can tell, all states of being. I mean, can you just decide to be bored? It's rough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you just decide to be afraid? You can kind of do it with anger easier, can't you? Because,
You can work yourself up.
well, anger is a lot about outward action, isn't it? So you can fake the action and start to feel that way. But it's very rough to pick a state of being. They're an effect, they're a side effect of the way that I see things, okay? Each one of these states of being has a particular way of seeing things. This one, like I say, is based on seeing that nothing works. If I get to the point where I see that all my efforts are futile, I'm in apathy.
What is bliss a way of seeing? What way is that seeing?
That everything is at peace. Everything is in harmony. All the things that seem to be at odds and discordant and don't go together, that everything is linked together in this intricate way. And that's what you see is how connected everything is. That it's all one, in other words. But not in the, like I say, in the sense of merging with it, but in the sense of seeing how everything is interconnected without any understanding of it, by the way. You experience it directly with no intellectual knowledge of what you're experiencing. If you go up higher, you start to understand it. You see the relationships and they make sense to you. You don't just experience them directly as everything is all part of one whole, okay? So that's the only way I've ever found to change states, is to change the way I see things, and I will get the state that's appropriate for that. I call that praying. I can't do the state. I can only pray for it. So if I want to get into a higher state, I use some experience I have of having been there before, and I start to look at things that way, and pretty soon I'm usually in that state, but I don't know that there's any guarantee. I can't do it myself, okay? But understanding the point of view, the way that you look at things there, I can kind of take on that point of view. My experience is that I will be there shortly. But I've never been very good at bliss. I think part of that is just because I'm not too interested in it. I like being active. I really don't like being a vegetable, no matter how enjoyable it is. That may have something to do with it. It's just not my cup of tea, I guess. You kind of have to want something to do it. I'd rather go higher, personally.
What's the next stop?
Just what I said. You start to actually see the relationships that in bliss you experience directly. And you understand them.
You don't have to stop at bliss. You can just...
You don't have to do nothing.
No.
You don't even have to live. But no, you don't have to stop at bliss. But that's the next state above bliss. In bliss, you experience those relationships directly without any real understanding of them. It's an experiential thing. You go up above that and you start to understand the relationships. You actually see how this is connected to this, in what way, how it works. And I find that fascinating. Back in the days when I was working really hard at trying to understand this stuff, that's what I would do. You guys want to do it down here with the mind. Well, I tried that too. It didn't work. It made no sense. And then after a little while of doing all this, I started getting some experience with higher states. And I said, why am I busting my butt to do this intellectual thing when I could just change states and just know? Just see it. And that's what I started doing. Instead of trying to figure it all out, I'd just see if I could get into that state above bliss where you see it, and I'd just look. And it was obvious. the thing I'd been working so hard to reason my way towards was now a perception. That makes more sense to me. So I stopped doing that. I stopped trying to figure it out. And I went to a place where I could see it. And then, after I'd seen it, it came down a little bit, because I do find it hard staying in these really high states for long periods of time. I find it pretty easy to live here. So if I'm going to make home base these days, this is where it's going to be. This is where I always come back, whether I go down or up, okay? Yeah.
Does that seeing in relationships, does that burn a lot of energy?
Well, yes, but you have more energy than you burn, so it's kind of irrelevant. Yeah, it requires a tremendous amount of energy. But it doesn't matter because you get more. I mean, that's one of the things that's true of all the states from vital interest on. You always have more than you need. And that's one of the problems with people who live in lower states. They usually have less than they need, isn't that right? And so you live in this weird state of lack all the time. You go up higher, you have more than you need. So it really doesn't matter. Yeah, it does take a tremendous amount of energy, but you got more than you need, so what difference does it make?
I was just wondering if that's why you said you couldn't hang out there very long.
Don't know why. I've just never been very good at staying in a really high state for a long period of time. I don't know why. My suspicion actually is that it's based on need. You get what you need. Because, for instance, when I'm doing these workshops, I have to stay in a high state for a whole weekend. I have no problems with it at all, but then I need to. But just doing it for fun or something, I can only do it for a short time. So that's my suspicion, is that it's based on this kind of universal principle. You always get what you need. So I have a feeling if I wanted to stay in a high state all the time, I would have to convince self that I needed to. And then I probably could, and I just can't be bothered. Too much work for something I don't even really buy. I do believe that I need to be at least here. Anything less than that, as far as I'm concerned, is dying. So I have no problems needing vital interest. But the other ones, you go there when you need to, and you get the job done, and you leave. That's kind of the way I look at it. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I have trouble with bliss. As far as I'm concerned, bliss is the spa of the universe. So if you get really badly stressed out, really banged up by life, you go to bliss, and it all gets repaired in about 15 minutes. It's really quite amazing. It's a little place to take a vacation. What's that?
It's a nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah, that's about right. And I don't get that banged up too much anymore. Don't really need to do that much. So it's hard to convince me to do it. I need to do this. I need to see things directly and stop getting it through reasoning. So I do that quite a bit. Okay. Just in daily life. It's amazing how often I look around and I just don't know what is going on. I don't know how to respond because I don't even have the facts. I don't even know what the situation is. Yeah, take a little short trip up there. It'll make sense shortly. That's just in daily life. If I want to understand what's going on here, I'm going to spend some time up there, okay? Instead of reasoning my way to it. I just can't see doing that. If you go even higher than that, you get into some things where you can literally perceive things all over the place. You can You can watch what's going on in Paris if you want to. And go visit the moon if you think that would be fun.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Are the professionals who get paid to do that, did they just luck into that state of being?
Well, some of it's talent. Some of it is talent. People are given certain talents, okay? For instance, healing. Healing has to be done in the Magi state, which is even up higher than this, okay? Above this is a state that we could call prophecy. Above this is a state called Magi. And healing has to be done in the Magi state. So people who are born with the talent of healing, going along with that is a talent at just blipping up to Magi really easily and really fast, and then doing what they do and then coming back. Other people have talents that get them into those states. You know. Sort of goes along with it. It'd be kind of weird to give you the talent to heal without the talent to get into a state where it's possible, wouldn't it? It'd be useless.
Is there a state of pure energy?
Well, if there is, I haven't visited it because I don't want to be pure energy, so I don't know. That's actually the problem that I always had with the Hindu thing, by the way. You were asking me about that earlier. The whole aim was to be one with the universe. Well, I don't want to be one with the universe. I like being me. So why take a trip to a place I don't want to go? I don't want to be one with the universe. I don't want to be destroyed. I like being me. I feel that way about place of pure energy. I'm not going there. It turned me into pure energy. I don't want to be pure energy. There are, I suspect, a number of places that, yeah, a human being could get to. I'm just not so sure it's wise to do it. So I kind of stay away from that. Maybe it's possible, it's just not what I want to do. Yeah.
Bringing it down a little, I'm guessing that one could use vital interest in the same way they use a seventh decision.
What do you mean, use it?
To inform, to have that goal, to provide necessity in the work.
I'm not sure what that means exactly. What do you mean, provide necessity?
To give you feedback on how you're doing.
Okay. I don't know. I have trouble thinking in those terms, I guess. I guess you could. But to me, this is about where I live. So if I were going to compare it to using anything, I'd compare it to picking a house that I'm going to live in for the next 5 years or something, okay? It's where I live. It's the environment that I create for myself to live in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And if I'm going to, I mean, who amongst us would say, okay, I'm going to build a house. What they build is some stupid little shack, you know, and they make sure that it's falling down around their ears. I mean, who would do that? If you make a place to live, aren't you going to try and make it to your taste and pleasant and enjoyable for you to do it in? Sure. And yet that's kind of what we do. We say, okay, I'm going to make fear my home. I'm going to make hatred my home. Right? Not me. Go ahead, but I'm going to pick another place. If I'm going to homestead somewhere, I'd rather homestead here, okay? This is my environment. That's part of why what you call environmental stress, I don't take account of too much, because as far as I'm concerned, I produce my own environment. I don't live in a ready-made place that does what it does. That's not where I live. You know where I live? In what I radiate. Isn't that right? I live in what comes out of me. Because it comes out of me and plops right in front of me, doesn't it? So everywhere I go, that's right there, isn't it? I live in what I radiate. That's the way it is. And that's what I radiate. My mood, my state of being. So by living in vital interest, I'm creating an environment for me. Everywhere I go, this is what I live in, is what radiates from vital interest. So then, if you want to play funny games that I don't particularly like, I'm living in this thing that I radiate, which is my own interest in this funny game you want to play. As long as I keep that going. And it can be delightful watching you be an asshole. Because that's what I live in, is what I radiate. You never walked into a place of business and you take one step inside and all you want to do is leave?
Yeah.
I have. I walk right in the door and I immediately want to walk right out. I don't even want to see if they've got what I want. I don't even want to stay there long enough to find out. That's because somebody there is in a shitty mood all the time. And you don't like it. That's what we live in, our own mood. So that's kind of the way I see it, all right? I am building a place for me to live. You want to be irresponsible and say it's happening to you. You have no choice but to get mad because they're mistreating you. You have no choice but to be bored because nothing is happening. God forbid you should make it happen, right? You have no choice but to be afraid because someone's threatening you and so on. But I produce my own environment. I want to make a nice place to live in. That's what I want to do.
You know, the other day in England, they had the big football game on the screen in the pub, and it was like the big match, and it was really interesting in terms of states of being. I clocked it because it was everybody stopped work and to watch the England versus Argentina game. And for 2 hours, everyone in there was packed, was in total vital interest with just the screen. But it felt amazing. It felt really just beautiful to be in a room full of people who were just so interested and so into this match.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, alive. You know? And then after they won,
Everybody dropped dead.
and you could see it just go.
Yeah. That's what I want to do. You don't have to go along with me, but I want to walk around in that everywhere I go. We won't do it together, that's fine. It is pretty neat though when a bunch of people get together and do it, isn't it? But you probably won't get that too much. Enjoy what you produce yourself. That's the great secret of environment as far as I'm concerned. You live in what you radiate. You are a radiant being. You are constantly radiating energy outward from yourself. And that's what you live in. If you don't like the world you inhabit, then make another one. You think that that can only be done by changing everyone else. That's what I call irresponsible. Any other questions or comments? As far as I'm concerned, that is one of the greatest secrets there is. You live in what you radiate. Look into that and find out what those words refer to. You discover some very interesting things. Well, see who gets it this time, huh? See how long it takes to forget and go back to, you made me. Why should I have to? Back to being irresponsible again. Or not, as the case may be. So, no questions or comments. I think that's probably enough for one weekend. Unless you have something for me. All I can say is just don't be seduced back, would you? Don't be seduced back. Don't go back to normal. All right.
Thank you.
Little present for you.
Thank you. Oh.